The first accomplishment that I hope to deliver in my foreign policy agenda as U.S. President will therefore be to end the Ukraine war on terms that advance American interests. I refuse to use our own military resources to defend against an invasion across somebody else's border when we should be using our own military to defend against the invasion across our own southern border in this country, the United States of America. And in ending that war, I will borrow from none other than our main man tonight, Richard Nixon, who traveled in 1972 to China to pull a maneuver that only he could have pulled off. Nobody else other than Richard Nixon could have done it, because it was his own vision. You know, if you're going to actually find one of those rare moments to reassert American interests on the global stage, you can't be just a vehicle for somebody else's agenda. In fact, much of the managerial class underneath him resisted the decision that he made, because they said, you can't trust Mao Zedong. Well, Richard Nixon knew we couldn't trust Mao Zedong, but he knew we could trust Mao to follow his self-interest if Mao could trust us to follow ours. And that's what he did. He did it out of strategic necessity. Yes, other presidents thereafter, in the decades that came after, messed that up with the doctrine of democratic capitalism that then took that to the next level, thinking that we were going to export Big Macs and Happy Meals, and somehow that was going to spread democracy to places like China. That didn't work. That was a bipartisan consensus through the 1990s, but that wasn't Nixon's vision. Nixon's vision was to recognize that the chief threat that the United States faced, the Cold War that we were actually in, was not with Red China, but was with the USSR. And he recognized that Mao was in a strategic relationship with Brezhnev, with the USSR at the time, that posed together an alliance that truly threatened American interests on the global stage. And so he did what he needed to do. He traveled to China to pull Mao Zedong out of that alliance with Brezhnev. And that was the beginning of our path that allowed Reagan to be on the strong footing to bring us to the near end of the Cold War itself. Well, I have a news flash for the modern neoconservative establishment, the modern propagators of liberal hegemony. The good news is that the USSR does not exist anymore. An alliance, NATO, that we formed to deter the spread of the USSR, to deter the possibility of nuclear war with the USSR, that alliance has now expanded more after the fall of the USSR than it ever did during the existence of the USSR. The real threat we face today, the equivalent of the USSR that Nixon faced, is actually communist China today. We have to open our eyes to the fact that we're not in the 1970s anymore. We live in the year 2023, and we must awaken to the real threats that we face. Now it's an enemy who we depend on for our modern way of life. And today, once again, how history comes full circle, the Russia-China alliance represents the single greatest military threat that we face in the U.S. today. Russia's hypersonic missile capabilities and nuclear capabilities outstripping that of the United States, combined with China's naval capacity in the South China Sea that outstrips that of the United States, combined with being an economy that we depend on for the shoes on our feet or the phones in our pockets. That Russia-China military alliance is the single greatest threat we face. Nobody in either political party is talking about it, and that is why I will end the Ukraine war on terms that require Vladimir Putin to exit his military alliance with China. This is a reverse move of what Nixon did. Putin is the new Mao. And while we have a foreign policy establishment in both parties, including Biden, who tries to supplicate to China to get Xi Jinping to drop Vladimir Putin, what we really need to be doing is getting Vladimir Putin to drop Xi Jinping.